The residence council president had a plan. The meeting was scheduled. The votes were practically guaranteed. That statue was coming out of there. But there was one thing he didn't know, one thing about that 82-year-old woman, one thing that would change everything, a miracle of the Virgin Mary. But before continuing, do something for me. Leave a comment saying where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I would love to see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary are reaching. Richard Mitchell was 58 years old and had recently moved to a gated community of upscale homes in Maine. In less than a year living there, he had already become president of the Residence Council. You know that type of person who turns everything into a rule? Richard was that type of person. As soon as he took over the board, he started making changes, many changes. He said the community needed modernization. Standards, organization, tall grass, notice. Non-standard trash bin, notice. He didn't let anything slide, nothing. The residents already knew his style. Some respected it. Others were afraid, and many simply avoided crossing paths with him. Richard lived alone in a big, beautiful, but empty house. Everything spotless, everything in its place. But also no laughter, no visitors, no family noise. He had been divorced for 15 years. His ex-wife left and took their daughter, Natalie, who was 12 at the time. In the beginning, Richard still saw his daughter on weekends, but over time, the visits became rarer, the calls shorter, and one day they simply stopped. It had been 8 years since Richard had spoken to his daughter. 8 years without hearing her voice. 8 years pretending it didn't hurt. He never admitted it to anyone, but deep down he knew the fault was his. He had always been too harsh, too demanding, too critical. And when he realized it, it was already too late. So Richard buried all of that, focused on what he knew how to do, manage. Do you know someone who lives more by rules than by people? Eleanor Davis was 82 years old and was the oldest resident of that community. When she and her husband William moved there, the place was different. There were hardly any houses, few residents, everything still in the beginning. William had been devoted to the Virgin Mary since he was young, and one of the first things he did was give a statue with a blue mantle as a gift to the community. They placed it in a garden there. Over time, flowers appeared. The landscape became beautiful. For some people it was indifferent. Others liked it, helped take care of it. Eleanor and William raised their 3 sons in that house, watched them grow up, go to college, get married, have families of their own. The house that was once full of noise gradually became silent. But Eleanor never wanted to leave. There were too many memories in every corner. The oldest son, Jacob, followed in his mother's footsteps. Eleanor had been a nurse her entire life, worked 30 years in the cardiology department of a hospital, retired 15 years ago. Jacob became a doctor, cardiologist, worked at the regional hospital. Eleanor was very proud of him. William passed away 5 years ago. They had 40 years of marriage. When he left, Eleanor felt that a part of her had left too, but she didn't let herself sink. She thanked God for the years she had and moved forward. After William passed away, Eleanor started caring for that statue as if it were the most important thing in the world. She cleaned it, put flowers there. It was her way of feeling close to her husband, and no one had ever complained about the statue. In 40 years, no one. Until Richard arrived. One of the changes Richard wanted to make in the community was to remove the statue of the Virgin Mary. He said it didn't fit with the community's standards, said it was outdated, that a common area wasn't a place for a religious image, said the garden needed to be renovated and the statue was in the way. Richard put the matter on the agenda for the next council meeting. Removal of the statue. Simple as that. When Eleanor found out, something inside her changed. She was a calm woman, discreet. Never got into trouble. But that statue wasn't just a statue. It was the memory of her husband. And a man who had just arrived wanted to take it away from there? Eleanor went to the community office and asked to speak with Richard. He received her in the office. He was sitting behind the desk with papers scattered in front of him. "Mr. Mitchell, I heard that you want to remove the statue of the Virgin Mary from the garden," said Eleanor with a firm voice. "That's correct. It doesn't fit with the community's standards. We're going to modernize that area," Richard responded without looking at her. "That statue has been there for decades. It was my husband who placed it. He asked for authorization at the time. Everyone agreed. That was a long time ago. Things change. The community needs to update. My husband passed away 5 years ago. That statue is all I have left of him there." Richard finally looked at her, but there was no compassion in his eyes. Just impatience. "Mrs. Davis, I understand that you have a sentimental attachment, but I was elected to modernize this community, and that's what I'm going to do. The statue will be voted on at the next meeting." Eleanor was silent for a moment, looked at Richard's face, saw a cold man, a man who didn't understand what really mattered in life. She didn't shout, didn't cry, just left. Richard stood still, looking at the door. He wasn't used to people who confronted him, but he didn't worry. He was certain he would win the vote. Sometimes those who speak less are the ones who surprise the most. Have you ever seen that happen? In the following days, Eleanor did what she had never done in years of living in the community. She went door to door, talked with the neighbors, told the story of the statue, told them about her husband, told them about the 40 years that image had been there without bothering anyone. Many residents sided with her, said it was absurd, that the statue was part of the community, that this Richard had arrived yesterday and already wanted to change everything. Others were on the fence, said they understood both sides, and a few supported Richard, said he was right, that the community needed to modernize. The subject became the talk everywhere. The community was divided. Richard didn't care about Eleanor's mobilization. He had the majority of the board on his side, and that was enough. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday at 7 in the evening in the community hall. In the days before the meeting, Richard wasn't well. He woke up more tired than normal, had headaches that came and went, a pressure in his chest that he ignored, shortness of breath when he climbed stairs. But Richard didn't go to the doctor. It had been years since he'd gone. He didn't have time for that, didn't have patience for that. And deep down, he was afraid of what he might discover. So he ignored it, drank more coffee to handle the fatigue, and kept going. How many times do we ignore what the body tries to warn us about? Thursday arrived, the day of the meeting. Richard arrived at the hall an hour early, organized the chairs, tested the microphone, put photos of the garden and the statue on a panel for everyone to see. The residents started arriving, one by one. The hall gradually filled up, about 30 people in total. Eleanor entered last, alone, with a simple dress and a rosary in her pocket, walked slowly to the back of the hall and sat in a chair in the corner. Richard looked at her. She just nodded slightly, without resentment, without anger, just a nod. 5 minutes until it started. Richard was standing near the main table, reviewing his notes one last time, papers in hand, heart racing, that pressure in his chest again. And that's when it happened. Suddenly he smelled something, a strong smell, unmistakable, roses. The smell of roses, and along with the smell, a strange sensation of peace. He looked around. There were no flowers in the hall, none, not in vases, not on tables, nothing. But the smell was there, strong, real, impossible to ignore. It lasted a few seconds, and then disappeared, as if it had never existed. Richard shook his head. It must be the fatigue, the stress, lack of sleep. He was imagining things. He ignored it, and started the meeting. Sometimes we receive a warning, and ignore it. How many times have you ignored something you couldn't explain? Richard tapped the microphone to get everyone's attention. Good evening. Let's begin. Today's subject is singular, the vote for removal of the religious statue from the community's common area. I'll present the case and then we'll open it for voting, said Richard with a firm voice. He pointed to the panel with the photos, showed the garden, showed the statue. This statue has been there for decades, but the community has changed. Grown, and I have a project to renovate that garden. We're going to put in a fountain, do new landscaping, plant trees, install benches. It will be a beautiful, modern space for all residents to enjoy. But for that, the statue needs to go. It's in the middle of the project. It's in the way, Richard explained. Some residents raised their hands to speak. The first was a middle-aged man, resident for 5 years. He said, I support the board president. We need to add value to the community. A fountain fits better with our standards. The second was a young woman, resident for 2 years. She said, I disagree. It's just a small statue. Can't you do the project around it? Does it really need to be removed? Richard responded, The project was designed for that entire space. The statue doesn't fit. It needs to go. That's when Eleanor stood up from the back of the hall, slowly, calmly. The hall fell silent. She walked to the front, stopped, looked at Richard, looked at the residents. This statue has been there for 40 years, said Eleanor with a firm voice. When my husband and I arrived here, this community barely existed. There were 6 houses, and my husband gave that statue as a gift to bless this place, to protect whoever lived here. Some residents shifted in their chairs. The silence was heavy. Richard interrupted. Mrs. Davis, this is sentimental attachment. The community needs to evolve. The hall murmured, some agreeing, others uncomfortable. Richard felt his face heat up, that pressure in his chest again. Let's vote, he said, trying to regain control. Those in favor of removing the statue, raise your hand. The discussion was heating up, some for Richard, others for Eleanor. Voices rising, interruptions, tension in the air. Richard was standing, responding to a resident who was defending Eleanor. His voice raised, his face red, that pressure in his chest getting stronger and stronger. And suddenly, in the middle of a sentence, he stopped. His hand went to his chest. His voice disappeared. His face turned pale. He tried to hold onto the table. Couldn't. Richard fell to the floor of the hall in front of everyone. Panic took over the hall, people screaming, people standing up, people not knowing what to do. Call an ambulance. What happened? Is he breathing? Someone do something. In the middle of all that chaos, Eleanor was the only one who acted. She went straight to where Richard had fallen, with firm steps, without wasting time. She knelt beside him. Eleanor checked his breathing, checked his pulse. He was unconscious, but his heart was still beating. Weak, irregular, but beating. Call 911. Now. Tell them it's a possible heart attack. Move back. Give me space, Eleanor shouted with a firm voice, commanding the situation. People obeyed, moved back. Someone ran to call 911. Eleanor loosened Richard's tie, positioned him correctly. She did everything that needed to be done, each procedure at the right moment, each gesture precise. And while doing this, she talked to him, quietly, calmly. Stay with me, Richard. Breathe, slowly. I'm here. Stay with me. Not today. The minutes until the ambulance arrived felt like hours, each second an eternity. Eleanor didn't leave his side for a single instant, her hands working, her voice calming, the same woman whose statue he wanted to remove. There, on her knees, on the cold floor of the hall, saving his life. If she hadn't been at that meeting, what would have happened to Richard? The paramedics arrived. They rushed into the hall with the stretcher and equipment. Eleanor gave all the information to the paramedics. What had happened, what she had done, how long he'd been unconscious. She said everything clearly, objectively, professionally. The paramedics listened carefully. One of them, the older one, looked at her and said, "Are you a doctor?" "Nurse, retired, 30 years in cardiology," Eleanor responded. The paramedic nodded. There was respect in his eyes. "You did everything right, exactly as it should have been done. You probably saved his life." They placed Richard on the stretcher carefully, connected the equipment. Eleanor went along in the ambulance. She got in without hesitating and stayed there, beside Richard, holding his hand, until they arrived at the hospital. On the way, things got complicated. Richard's heart stopped. Once. The paramedics brought him back. Then it stopped again. Brought him back again. Twice his heart gave up. Twice the paramedics forced it to continue. Eleanor watched everything, prayed quietly the whole time. When they arrived at the hospital, Richard was taken straight to the emergency room. Eleanor stayed in the waiting room. Hours passed. The clock on the wall seemed not to move. Eleanor stayed there, sitting in an uncomfortable chair, praying quietly, the rosary in her hands. It was almost midnight when the emergency room door opened. A doctor came out, tall, in a white coat, stethoscope around his neck. He looked around, searching for someone. When he saw Eleanor, he went straight to her. "Mom," he said. Eleanor stood up. "Jacob." It was her son, cardiologist at the hospital. He was on duty that night. "He's going to be okay, Mom," said Jacob, hugging her. Eleanor felt relief take over her body. The tears came. "Was it serious?" Eleanor asked. It was. Very serious. His heart had been overloaded for a long time. Untreated high blood pressure, chronic stress. "It was a heart attack," Jacob explained. He paused, looked into his mother's eyes. "But you saved his life, Mom. What you did in those first minutes was what made the difference. If it weren't for that, he probably wouldn't have made it here in time." Eleanor said nothing, just nodded. The woman he wanted to expel saved his life, and the doctor who finished the job was her son. How many coincidences are too many coincidences? When Richard woke up, he didn't know where he was, didn't remember anything. Gradually, the memory came back. The meeting, the discussion, the pain in his chest, and then nothing. A void. He tried to move, but his body didn't obey properly. "Mr. Mitchell, good to see you awake." "I'm Dr. Jacob Davis. I'm the cardiologist who took care of your case," said the doctor with a calm voice. "What happened to me?" Richard asked with a weak voice. "You had a heart attack. Severe. Your heart stopped twice on the way here. We managed to stabilize you, but it was close. You're going to need serious monitoring from now on. Lifestyle changes, everything." Richard closed his eyes, tried to process that. "How did I survive?" he asked. The doctor smiled slightly. "A woman performed first aid on site. She was the one who kept you alive until the ambulance arrived. Without what she did in those first minutes, you wouldn't have made it here in time." "Who was it?" The doctor paused. "My mother, Eleanor Davis." Richard felt the floor disappear. Eleanor. The woman with the statue. "She's out there now. Wants to know if you want to receive a visitor." Richard couldn't respond. He stayed looking at the ceiling, trying to understand what had happened to his life. A few minutes later, the room door opened again. Eleanor entered slowly. She didn't say anything, just walked to the chair beside the bed and sat down. Silence. Richard didn't know what to say. How do you thank a person who saved your life, especially a person he had treated so badly? He was the first to break the silence. "You saved my life," said Richard with his voice trembling. "I did what needed to be done," Eleanor responded simply. "I was trying to remove the statue, and you—" "Richard, I did it because it was right. Anyone needing help, I would have helped." Silence again. Richard looked at her, into her eyes, those calm eyes, without anger, without resentment. "Why did you go to that meeting?" he asked, his voice breaking. "You could have stayed home. Why did you go?" Eleanor smiled slightly, a smile that carried years of faith. I woke up that day and felt I needed to go. I prayed in the morning in front of the statue, and I felt a very great peace, a peace I can't explain, as if the Virgin Mary was telling me I needed to be there. So I went. Richard stayed silent. Richard felt the tears come. He tried to hold them back, but couldn't. He cried, for the first time in years, cried like he hadn't cried since his daughter left, cried for everything he had done wrong, for all the people he had pushed away. A week passed. Richard was improving, still weak, still in the hospital, but out of danger. The doctor said soon he could go home. It was a Wednesday afternoon. Richard was lying down, looking out the window, when he heard a knock on the door. "Come in," he said, expecting it to be a nurse. The door opened. It was a woman, brown hair, eyes he knew well, eyes he saw every time he looked in the mirror. Natalie, his daughter. She was standing in the doorway, not knowing whether to come in or stay there, her hand squeezing the strap of her purse, her face full of emotions she didn't know how to express. "You came," said Richard, his voice almost disappearing. "They called me," Natalie responded, "from the hospital, said it was serious. I was still the emergency contact." Silence. Richard thought about all those years, 8 years without talking to her. "I came from far away," said Natalie, still standing in the doorway. "I don't even know why I came. We haven't talked in so long." "I know," said Richard. "Sit down, daughter, please." Natalie hesitated. Then, slowly, she entered the room and sat in the chair beside the bed. They stayed in silence for a long time. Neither knew how to start. Richard was the first to speak. "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything. For the father I was, for the father I wasn't." Natalie started to cry. It wasn't an instant reconciliation, but it was a beginning, a door that opened, a first step on a path that would still be long. Sometimes you have to almost lose your life to realize what you were losing, right? A few days later, Richard was discharged. He asked to speak with Eleanor. She came, with the same calmness as always. "I wanted to thank you," said Richard, "for everything, for saving my life, for praying for me, for not giving up on me even when I was trying to hurt you." "You don't need to thank me," said Eleanor. Eleanor continued, "And you know what's strange, Richard? When I was a nurse, I always prayed to the Virgin Mary before each shift, always. Asked her to guide my hands, to help me save whoever needed to be saved." Richard felt a chill run through his body. He remembered the smell of roses, that strong smell, impossible to explain. He didn't tell Eleanor, kept that to himself. But in that moment, something inside him changed. The weeks went by. The vote about the statue never happened. The statue remained in the community garden, in the same place where William had placed it. Natalie came to spend a few days with her father during his recovery. It was difficult at first. There was a lot unsaid between them, but they talked. Richard continued being president of the residents' council, but he was changed, more tolerant as much as possible. He still enforced what needed to be enforced, still monitored what needed to be monitored. But now he talked before notifying, greeted residents by name. One day Richard called the community caretaker, took him to the garden where the statue was. "Do you see this statue?" said Richard. "Yes, sir. The one of the Virgin Mary," the caretaker responded. "I want you to take care of it. Keep the grass around it always trimmed. Clean it when needed. Keep it always beautiful." The caretaker was puzzled. "You want me to take care of the statue?" "I do. But weren't you the one who wanted to remove it from there?" Richard was silent for a moment. "I was, but things change." The caretaker didn't understand, but obeyed. From that day on, the statue of the Virgin Mary became officially cared for as part of the community. Months passed. Richard took a walk every morning, woke up early, had breakfast, and went out to walk around the community, feeling the fresh air, hearing the birds, watching the sun rise. The route always passed by the garden where the statue was. Sometimes Eleanor was there, watering the plants, tending to the flowers. They would greet each other, talk a little, about the weather, about the neighbors, about life. One day Richard stopped in front of the garden. Eleanor wasn't there. He stood looking at the statue. He thought about everything that had happened, the life he almost lost, and that he was now rebuilding. Richard didn't know if it was a miracle. Didn't know if it was coincidence. He had never been religious, never prayed, never understood these things. He had spent his whole life trying to explain everything, trying to control everything. And the world didn't fit into that. Life didn't fit into that. Some things simply happen. Some coincidences are too many coincidences. Some doors open when we least expect. Some paths cross in ways we can't understand. Before finishing, I want to invite you to be part of our prayer community for the Virgin Mary, a space of faith and hope where people from around the world unite to pray and share received blessings. If you feel in your heart the desire to be part of this prayer chain, click below and become a channel member today and come pray with us. And look, if you made it here to the end of Richard's story, do something for me. Write in the comments, statue. The statue that a board president wanted to remove and that ended up saving his life. I want to see how many hearts this story truly reached. And every time I read it in the comments, I'll know that one more person believes that the Virgin Mary takes care of those who need it, even when the person doesn't know they need it. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. Write in the comments about some miracle you've witnessed or experienced, and share this video with someone who needs to renew their hope today. May the Virgin Mary continue blessing and protecting you and your family. Amen.